Hi everyone, it's Dr. G. I'm back here today to talk to you about the scientific method in sociology. So let's go ahead and get started. So if you remember from a previous video that I defined science as a systematic method of discovery. Now, I personally love science, and I'll tell you why. I believe that the ultimate goal of science is the pursuit of truth. And we so desperately need truth in the world that we live in today. The scientific research method is a systematic plan for doing research. There are several steps in conducting scientific research. And what we're going to do in this video is take a quick, brief look at the different steps that make up the research model. So let's start with step number one, selecting a topic. In the discipline of sociology, there are so many different topics that we could talk about in research, like suicide, homelessness, and poverty. So for our example, I'm going to pick poverty. That will be our topic. Number two, the second thing that we do is define the problem. When we define the problem, we are specifying exactly what we want to learn about the topic that we just chose about poverty. So basically in step two, we are narrowing down the topic because we could research so many different things about poverty. We certainly can't. So we need to pick something that's very specific. We need to narrow it down. So maybe what we could do is we could take a look at who is more likely to live in poverty, men or women. So I think you see that in step two, we have narrowed down our topic. Step number three is reviewing the literature. There are several reasons why we want to go and review the literature in the library or online. One is to see if the question that we have just posed, are men or women more likely to live in poverty, has that question already been answered by other scientists? If it's not been answered, another reason that we would review the literature is that by reading what other people have done in their research about poverty, men and women, it will stimulate new ideas. For example, we might want to compare men and women living in urban versus rural areas. Number four, the fourth step is to formulate a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is a statement of what you expect to find according to predictions from a theory. So it's kind of like a best educated guess of what you think you're going to find when you have concluded doing all of your research. Step number five is choose a research method. And so you can see immediately below the next line, there are several different ways that we can collect our data: surveys, participant observations, secondary analysis, documents, unobtrusive measures, and experiments. All right, so you're going to want to pick one or more of these based on what type of research you are conducting and which one or more you believe will work best for what you are doing, okay? So let's take a look at the different ways of collecting our data. We're going to start with a survey. There are two primary types of surveys. One, written documents, like handing someone a piece of paper to fill out, or emailing someone a survey for them to complete and to send back to you. The other type of survey is sitting down and talking to someone, an interview. Now, all of these different ways of collecting your data will have good points and get bad points, rewards and challenges. And so let's take a look at some rewards and challenges when it comes to either picking a written document or an interview. If you want to pick a written document to have people fill out, one of the advantages is that you can send it out to many, many, many people, thousands of people, all right? In an interview, you can only realistically sit down and spend so much time talking to people. So that's going to be a limitation, all right? The document you can mail to many, many people. However, on the flip side, one of the challenges of a document is that you kind of lose control. In other words, the people that choose to fill them out, if they choose to fill them out, and many of them don't, if they don't understand the question on that survey, they may answer it incorrectly. And that is definitely not what you want. Interviews, one of the good things about an interview is that you can see someone's body language. And though you, as the researcher, you need to be very careful how you interpret body language, that's something that you get to see. You don't see that with a document. One of the major challenges with an interview is what's called interviewer bias. What is interviewer bias? That means that if I have strong feelings and opinions about a topic that I'm interviewing someone about, let's say a controversial topic, if I am not careful as the researcher, I can actually bias how the responder will respond to my questions, and I don't want that, okay? That's the survey. Another way that we can collect our data is called participant observation, and the name tells you exactly what it is. As a researcher, you are participating in your observation. You are there in the environment. If you take a look here at my picture, we have what appears to be a classroom setting, a teacher at the whiteboard and students. But this student right here, if that student is doing research using participant observation, that is not actually a student in the class. They are not there to earn a grade in the class. They are there to actually watch what's happening in the classroom. And they are using participant observation because they are there inside the environment watching, okay? There are ethical issues that might come up here. As I said earlier, all of these different ways of collecting your data has good things and bad things that come with them. Is it ethical to watch people when they don't know why you're really there and why you're really watching them? That's something you have to debate. Another way that we can collect our data is what's called secondary analysis. Researchers are constantly collecting large sums of data doing their research. And if that data works for your research, then they've already done the work. And you simply ask permission from them to use it, and there you go. You've saved a lot of time. On the flip side, you have to ask yourself, is there a problem here? Did they collect their data using good data collection principles? So that's a potential weakness, okay? So secondary analysis is simply just going through information that has already been collected and looking at it a second time. Another major way of collecting data is simply by getting information from documents, records that we humans create all of the time. Tax records, school records, police records, immigration records. If that information that's collected by different organizations, if that's what you need for your data, for your research, then you get that data with permission, and there you go, you've got your data. Another way of collecting data for doing your research is what's called unobtrusive measures. And yet again, the title will kind of tell you what it is. You are not intruding in the environment that you want to find out and gather information from. So, for example, you might hide behind a wall or hide behind a bush. You might install some type of a hole in a ceiling panel, or maybe even a camera that's not visible within a particular classroom. The key with using unobtrusive measures is this: the people that are being watched must not in any way suspect that they are being watched. If they feel or believe that they're being watched, you are not using unobtrusive measures. Okay. The first 5 methods that we've already talked about have one thing in common. And the one thing that they all have in common is that you're simply gathering information, period. But there is one other major way of collecting data for doing research, and that's called an experiment. Experiments help to determine cause and effect. So what I have on the screen here is a very simple experiment. And I say it's very simple because experiments can become much more complex than this. They can have multiple groups. They can have multiple what's called independent variables, for example. But this is as simple as they get. So let's run through a very simple experiment. We start on the left-hand side. We have human subjects. So this is sociology. So the experiment will be on human beings. And we want to randomly assign them into two different groups. What does random assignment mean? That means every person that's going to be in this research has exactly the same likelihood of being in what's called either the experimental group or the control group. Okay, so we have the two groups. You might ask yourself, why do we have two groups? If we want to run an experiment and do something, we want to change or manipulate something with human beings, and that's what an experiment is, why not just do it to everyone? Well, we don't do it to everyone because we need to be able to make some type of comparison. And if we don't hold one group constant, we call them the control group, we don't do anything to them, we don't expose them to what's called the independent variable, then we won't have anything to compare our research to. So we expose the experimental group to what's called the independent variable. That's the change. And then once our exposure time has ended, then we gather information and compare what has happened to the experimental group to what has happened to the control group. If there is a statistically significant difference between what we find in the results of the experimental group and the control group, then we can start to conclude that the independent variable, the change variable, seemed to do something. It seemed to make a change, all right? So that's an experiment. Those are the major ways that we can collect data in sociological science research. So let's say we're running an example of comparing if men and women, which one is more likely to live in poverty. Let's say that we want to collect our data using interviews, one of the survey methods. So we go out and we set up interviews with people that are living in poverty. We gather all of our information. We're now going to move to step number 7. We have all of our data. We've done all of our interviews and surveys. In social sciences like sociology, what we will tend to do is use statistics. We will enter all of our quantitative information and data into a statistical program. We will run that program, and then we will get a result. We will get results that show us things like, well, within a 2 to 3 margin point of error, we will see that men are more likely to live in poverty than women, okay? Just an example. All right. So another thing that we're going to do when analyzing the results is we're going to compare what we found back to our hypothesis. Step number 4 up here. Did we find what we thought we were going to find? Did we prove or disprove our hypothesis? All right. The next thing that we're going to do is share the results. The first group of people that we're going to share our results with will be other scientists that specialize in whatever we are getting ready, whatever we have studied. So if I, as a sociologist, am studying poverty among men and women, and I know that there are several other sociologists that are experts in that area, I will send my research write-up, everything that I have done, I have written it up very carefully to them so that they can review it. Peer review is an awesome part of the research scientific method because what it allows is for other scientists to take a look at what you've done and to either say, this is good work, I want to sign off on it and give my approval, or look at it and go, this is horrible work. You did this wrong, you did that wrong, you overlooked this, you emphasized this too much, and I'm not going to sign it because I do not want to put my reputation on the line. Scientists rely on their reputation within the field that they study, and they want to make sure that their reputation is held high, and so they will be very critical of the work that they peer review. If you get peer reviewed and other scientists feel like your research is great and you've done a good job, they sign off on it, they send it back to you, and then ultimately you can submit your work for publication. And that is a quick look at science in sociology. I hope that you have enjoyed this, and I hope to see you back very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.